Hello everyone and welcome back to the Horror Hut. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the episodes. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. I always enjoyed my nightly jogs. After a long day at work, there was nothing like the cool night air and the solitude of the park to clear my mind. It was my time, a routine I cherished. But tonight was different. Tonight, I felt uneasy as I laced up my running shoes and stepped outside. The park, usually a comforting blanket of quiet, felt ominous. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the familiar path seemed to twist in unsettling ways. I brushed it off as work stress. A few deep breaths and I started running, hoping to shake off the feeling. Halfway through my usual route, I noticed a figure behind me. At first, it was just a shape in the distance, someone else taking advantage of the cool night. But as I ran, the figure stayed the same distance behind me, neither gaining nor falling back. I sped up, my heart beating a little faster than normal. The figure matched my pace. Panic started to creep in, tightening my chest. I glanced back and saw a man, hood up, face obscured in the shadows. I turned off my usual path, hoping to lose him. My feet pounded against the pavement as I took a shortcut through a small wooded area. It was darker here, the trees forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps echoing mine. I cursed under my breath, pushing myself to run faster. The branches clawed at my arms and face, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't. Breaking through the trees, I found myself on a less familiar path. It led to a more secluded part of the park, an area I usually avoided. But tonight, it was my only option. I glanced back and saw him emerge from the trees, still following, relentless. My breaths were coming in short gasps now. I needed to think, to find a way to lose him. Up ahead, I saw a small maintenance shed. I veered towards it, hoping to hide inside. I reached the shed and yanked on the door. Locked. Desperation clawed at me as I looked around for another option. There was a narrow gap between the shed and the fence. I squeezed through, pressing myself against the cold metal, hoping he wouldn't see me. The footsteps slowed. I held my breath, trying to quiet the pounding in my chest. He was close, too close. I could hear his breathing, slow and deliberate. He paused right in front of the shed, his shadow stretching across the ground. Minutes felt like hours. I didn't dare move, barely even dared to breathe. Finally, his footsteps started again, moving away this time. I waited until I was sure he was gone before slipping out from my hiding spot. I needed to get home, but the path back was now tainted with fear. I stayed close to the trees, keeping to the shadows, moving as quietly as I could. The park that had once been my sanctuary was now a maze of dangers. My mind raced, trying to understand who this man was and why he was following me. Had he been watching me all this time? Did he know my routine, my routes? The thought made my skin crawl. I took a different path out of the park, one that led me through an old playground. The rusty swings creaked in the wind, adding to the eerie atmosphere. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him at any moment. Finally, I saw the lights of the main road. Relief washed over me, but I didn't slow down. Not until I was back in the safety of my apartment. I burst through the door, locking it behind me, my breaths coming in ragged gasps. I collapsed on the couch, trembling. My mind replayed the night's events over and over, each time more terrifying. Who was he? What did he want? The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything, but without a clear description of the man, there wasn't much they could do. They promised to patrol the park more frequently, but it did little to ease my fear. For weeks, I avoided the park, choosing instead to jog in the mornings when there were more people around. But the fear lingered, a constant companion. Every shadow seemed menacing, every unfamiliar face a potential threat. I installed more locks on my doors, got a security system, and changed my routine. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching, waiting. One night, I found a note slipped under my door. It was a simple message, written in neat, precise handwriting. "See you soon." My blood ran cold. He had found me. I called the police again, but there was little they could do without more evidence. The note was taken for analysis, but I knew it wouldn't lead anywhere. This man was careful, methodical. I couldn't stay in my apartment any longer. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend across town. But even there, the fear followed me. Every knock on the door, every creak of the floorboards, sent my heart racing. I stopped jogging altogether, too afraid to venture out alone. My life, once so normal and predictable, was now filled with anxiety and paranoia. I felt like a prisoner in my own life, constantly looking over my shoulder. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the fear began to fade. The note remained the last tangible sign of his presence. But the psychological scars lingered, a constant reminder of the night my sanctuary turned into a nightmare. Even now, years later, I can't jog at night without feeling a twinge of fear. The park, once my refuge, is now a place I avoid. And every time I see a shadow move in the corner of my eye, I remember the man who turned my life upside down. I never found out who he was or why he chose me. But one thing is certain, I will never be the same. The clock read 2:15 a.m. I was in my home office, the soft glow of my desk lamp the only light in the house. The rest of the world was asleep, including my 7-year-old son, Ben. I often worked late into the night, the quiet hours perfect for catching up on reports and emails. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back in my chair, stretching. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of the old wood. I was about to get up for a glass of water when I heard a faint, almost imperceptible sound. A window sliding open. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, straining to listen. The sound came again, followed by the creak of floorboards. Someone was in the house. Panic surged through me. Ben was upstairs, sleeping. I had to protect him. I quietly got up and turned off my desk lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I grabbed my phone, but the battery was dead. I cursed under my breath. I peeked out of my office door, the hallway dimly lit by a nightlight near the stairs. I could see a shadow moving downstairs. Whoever it was, they were being careful, methodical. I slipped back into my office and closed the door silently. There was a small closet at the back of the room. I squeezed inside, pulling the door shut behind me. My heart pounded in my chest, so loud I was sure it would give me away. Footsteps echoed up the stairs. Slow, deliberate. I held my breath, praying Ben wouldn't wake up and call out for me. The intruder's steps grew louder, closer. They paused outside my office door. The door creaked open. I could see a sliver of the room through the crack in the closet door. A figure stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, moving with an unsettling confidence. This wasn't a random burglar. The figure moved to my desk, rifling through papers and drawers. My mind raced. Why here? Why now? Then it hit me. Last month, I had testified in court against a former coworker, a man named Richard. He had been caught embezzling funds from the company. I was a key witness. The figure turned, and in the dim light, I caught a glimpse of his face. It was Richard. My blood ran cold. He wasn't here to rob the house. He was here for revenge. Richard moved to the door and stepped out into the hallway. I needed to get out, to call the police, but Ben was my priority. I had to keep him safe. I waited until Richard's footsteps faded, then slowly opened the closet door. I crept to the office door, peeking out. Richard was heading toward Ben's room. Panic surged through me again. I had to stop him. I grabbed a heavy bookend from my desk and slipped into the hallway, staying in the shadows. Richard reached Ben's door and slowly pushed it open. I had to act. I moved swiftly, raising the bookend, and brought it down on Richard's head. He crumpled to the floor with a thud. Ben stirred in his bed, mumbling in his sleep. I knelt beside Richard, checking if he was still breathing. He was, but unconscious. I needed to restrain him before he woke up. I grabbed a belt from my room and tied his hands and feet. I grabbed the landline phone from my room and dialed 911, my hands shaking. I whispered my address and the situation, urging them to hurry. Then, I sat on the floor, keeping an eye on Richard, adrenaline coursing through me. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, I heard sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me. Richard began to stir, groaning. I held the bookend in my hand, ready to defend Ben and myself if necessary. The police arrived, bursting through the front door. I called out to them, and within moments, officers were in the hallway, taking Richard into custody. I collapsed into a chair, exhaustion and relief overwhelming me. Ben woke up, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, what's going on?" he asked, his voice filled with sleep. I hugged him tightly, assuring him everything was okay. The officers took my statement and assured me Richard would be facing serious charges. They promised to increase patrols in the area for my peace of mind. As they led Richard away, he glared at me, a look of pure hatred. But I didn't care. He was going to prison, and we were safe. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't sleep, my mind replaying the events over and over. The reality of how close we came to disaster hit me hard. I spent the early morning hours securing the house, reinforcing windows and doors, and installing new locks. Days turned into weeks, and the fear began to fade. Ben returned to his normal routine, and I slowly reclaimed my nightly work hours, though I was always more alert, more cautious. One night, as I worked late, I heard a noise outside the window. My heart raced, but it was just the wind. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that we were safe. But the memory of that night would always stay with me, a reminder of how quickly life can change. The house was secure, and we were moving forward. But I knew I would never take our safety for granted again. The world could be a dangerous place, but I would do whatever it took to protect my son. Even now, I keep a bat under my desk and my phone always charged. I installed a security system, and we have a plan for emergencies. The night that was once peaceful and productive had become a time of vigilance. Life went on, and we adapted. But every so often, I would wake in the middle of the night, the memory of Richard's shadow in the hallway fresh in my mind. I would get up, check on Ben, and remind myself that we were safe. I should have never taken that detour. It was almost midnight when I pulled into the gas station, a lone beacon of light on an otherwise deserted stretch of highway. The road trip to visit my best friend seemed like a great idea a few days ago, but now I was just tired and eager to reach my destination. The gas station looked old, a relic from another time. A flickering neon sign cast an eerie glow over the lot. I parked by the lone pump and got out, shivering in the cool night air. The place was eerily quiet, and the darkness felt oppressive. I walked inside, a little bell tinkling above the door. The clerk looked up from behind the counter, his eyes shadowed and intense. He was middle-aged, with greasy hair and a scruffy beard. Something about his gaze made me uneasy. "Need gas?" he asked, his voice rough and gravelly. I nodded, offering a nervous smile. "Yeah, and a bathroom if you have one." He gestured to the back of the store. "Through that door. Here's the key." He handed me a large, rusted key attached to a piece of wood. I took it and headed towards the door, feeling his eyes on me the entire time. The bathroom was grimy and dimly lit. I hurried, the unease from the clerk's stare lingering. When I emerged, I was surprised to see the store's lights flickering, casting erratic shadows. I returned the key to the counter. The clerk was still watching me, his expression unreadable. I glanced around the store, noticing the security cameras. They were all turned off. My pulse quickened. "Where are you headed?" he asked, too casually. "Just visiting a friend," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I should get going. Can I pay for the gas?" He nodded slowly, then turned and locked the front door. The sound of the bolt sliding into place sent a chill down my spine. "You're not going anywhere just yet." "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice rising with panic. He ignored me, moving towards the counter with deliberate slowness. My heart pounded as I backed away, looking for an exit. "You shouldn't be out here alone at night," he said, almost kindly. "It's dangerous." "I have to go," I insisted, glancing towards the back door. He stepped in my path, blocking the way. The situation was quickly becoming a nightmare. "You're not leaving," he said firmly. "Not until I know you're safe." "What does that even mean?" I shouted, my voice echoing in the empty store. He advanced towards me, and I backed up until I hit a shelf. "Calm down," he said, as if trying to soothe a frightened animal. "I'm just looking out for you." My eyes darted around the store, searching for something I could use to defend myself. The shelves were stocked with the usual gas station fare, snacks, drinks, and a few basic tools. My gaze settled on a heavy flashlight within reach. I grabbed it, brandishing it like a weapon. "Stay back," I warned, my voice shaking. He paused, a strange smile playing on his lips. "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." "Then let me go," I demanded, inching towards the back door. He shook his head, his expression turning cold. "I can't do that. You don't understand what's out there." My mind raced, trying to think of a way to escape. I needed to get out of there, fast. I took a deep breath and bolted for the back door, hoping to catch him off guard. He was faster than I expected. He grabbed my arm, pulling me back with surprising strength. I swung the flashlight, striking him in the shoulder. He grunted in pain but didn't let go. "Let me go!" I screamed, hitting him again. This time, he staggered back, releasing me. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I ran for the door, fumbling with the lock. It wouldn't budge. Panic surged through me as I turned to see him advancing again, his face twisted with anger. "You shouldn't have done that," he growled. Desperation gave me strength. I kicked the door, throwing my weight against it until it finally gave way. I stumbled out into the night, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran to my car, praying the keys were still in my pocket. They were. I jumped in, locked the doors, and fumbled with the ignition. The engine roared to life just as the clerk burst out of the store. He pounded on the window, shouting something I couldn't hear over the engine's noise. I threw the car into reverse, peeling out of the parking lot and back onto the highway. My hands shook as I drove, adrenaline coursing through me. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see his car following me. There was nothing but darkness. I drove for miles before I dared to stop. I pulled over at a well-lit rest area, my entire body trembling. I took deep breaths, trying to calm myself. I was safe, for now. As I sat there, the events of the night replayed in my mind. What had he meant about the danger outside? Why had he locked me in? I didn't have the answers, but one thing was clear. I had narrowly escaped something terrible. I checked my phone, grateful to see it still had a signal. I called the police, reporting the incident. They assured me they would investigate, but I knew it would be a while before I felt safe again. I resumed my journey, the darkness no longer feeling comforting. The road stretched ahead, a reminder that sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones we imagine, but the ones we meet in the most unexpected places. As I drove, I kept my eyes on the road, my mind on high alert. The gas station was far behind me, but the fear lingered, a shadow I couldn't shake. The night had shown me its darker side, and I would never forget it. I reached my friend's house just as dawn was breaking. She opened the door, her face filled with concern. I collapsed into her arms, the events of the night spilling out in a rush of words and tears. We called the police again, and this time, they took my statement in person. They assured me they would look into the clerk's background and the strange occurrences at the gas station. As the sun rose, I felt a small measure of safety return. But I knew it would be a long time before I could drive at night without fear. A long time before I could forget the look in the clerk's eyes and the terror I felt in that gas station. I learned a hard lesson that night. Sometimes, the real horror isn't what we imagine in the dark, but the dangers we encounter in the most ordinary places. I never thought twice about picking up hitchhikers. In my line of work, as a long-haul truck driver, you see a lot of lonely roads and desperate souls. It was a rainy night, the kind of night where the darkness seemed to swallow the world whole. I was about halfway through my route when I spotted him, standing by the side of the road, drenched and shivering. He looked harmless enough. Young, probably in his early 20s, with a backpack slung over one shoulder. I pulled over and rolled down the window. "Need a ride?" I called out. He nodded gratefully, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thanks, man," he said, climbing into the passenger seat. He introduced himself as Jake, said he was trying to get to the next town over. He was polite, even offered to help pay for gas, though I waved him off. The rain pounded against the windshield as we drove in silence for a while. Jake seemed friendly at first, making small talk about the weather and asking about my route. But there was something off about him. Maybe it was the way his eyes darted around the cab, or the nervous energy he exuded. I tried to brush it off as paranoia. An hour into the drive, the conversation took a darker turn. Jake started asking personal questions, where I was from, if I had a family. I kept my answers vague, trying to steer the conversation back to safer topics, but he persisted. "So, you're out here all alone, huh?" he asked, his tone shifting. I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "Yeah, just me and the open road," I replied, forcing a smile. He didn't smile back. "You ever get scared out here?" All by yourself? He asked, his eyes boring into mine. I shrugged, trying to keep my voice steady. Sometimes. But you get used to it. Jake fell silent, staring out the window as the rain continued to pour. The tension in the cab was palpable. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had made a mistake picking him up. My mind raced, trying to think of a way to get him out without causing a scene. You know, Jake said suddenly, breaking the silence. I've always wondered what it would be like to take a truck like this. Just drive off into the night, leave everything behind. His words sent a chill down my spine. Why don't you? I asked cautiously. He turned to look at me, a strange gleam in his eyes. Maybe I will, he said, his voice low. Maybe tonight. I glanced at the road, my heart pounding. We were miles from the nearest town, surrounded by darkness and rain. I had to think fast. Listen, Jake, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I think there's a rest stop up ahead. How about we pull over and get some coffee? My treat. He seemed to consider it for a moment, then nodded. Sure, coffee sounds good. I breathed a silent sigh of relief, hoping I could find a way to alert someone at the rest stop. We drove in silence for a few more miles until I spotted the flickering neon sign of a diner. I pulled into the parking lot, my hands trembling. As soon as we stopped, Jake's demeanor changed. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a knife, the blade glinting in the dim light. Don't make any sudden moves, he warned, his voice deadly calm. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. Okay, Jake, I said slowly. No sudden moves. Just tell me what you want. He leaned closer, the knife inches from my throat. Get out of the truck, he ordered. I complied, my heart pounding in my chest. The rain soaked through my clothes as I stood outside, watching him warily. Jake climbed out, keeping the knife pointed at me. We're going to walk to that diner, and you're not going to do anything stupid. Got it. I nodded, trying to keep my breathing steady. We walked across the parking lot, the rain masking the sound of our footsteps. The diner was nearly empty, just a lone waitress behind the counter and a couple of truckers nursing their coffee. Jake pushed me towards a booth in the back, his grip on my arm tight. The waitress approached, giving us a curious look. What can I get you folks? 2 coffees, Jake said, not taking his eyes off me. She nodded and walked away, oblivious to the tension. As we waited, Jake leaned in close. You try anything, and I'll slit your throat right here. Understand? I nodded, my mind racing. I had to find a way to get help without setting him off. The waitress returned with the coffees, and I forced a smile. Thanks, I said, my voice shaking. She hesitated, looking between us. Everything okay here? She asked, her eyes narrowing. Everything's fine, Jake said, his voice calm. Just a late-night coffee run. She didn't look convinced, but she walked away. I glanced around the diner, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on a payphone near the restrooms. If I could just get to it. Drink your coffee, Jake ordered, breaking my train of thought. I picked up the cup, my hands trembling. I had to get out of this alive. As I sipped the hot coffee, an idea formed in my mind. I glanced at Jake, trying to gauge his reaction. You know, I said casually, this coffee's not bad. But I think it needs a little sugar. Can I get some from the counter? He hesitated, then nodded. Go ahead. But no funny business. I stood up slowly, walking towards the counter. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached for the sugar packets. I glanced at the waitress, hoping she'd notice something was wrong. Can I get a refill? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She nodded, giving me a concerned look as she poured more coffee into my cup. As she turned away, I whispered urgently, "Call the police. I'm being held hostage." Her eyes widened in shock, but she quickly composed herself. "Sure thing, hon," she said loudly, walking towards the payphone. I held my breath, praying she'd make the call. Jake watched me intently as I returned to the booth, the knife still in his hand. "What took you so long?" he demanded. "Just getting some sugar," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's drink our coffee and go." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. We sat in tense silence, the rain still pouring outside. Minutes felt like hours as I waited for the police to arrive. Finally, I heard the faint sound of sirens in the distance. Jake's eyes narrowed, and he glanced towards the window. "What did you do?" he hissed, his grip on the knife tightening. "Nothing," I said quickly. "I swear." The sirens grew louder, and Jake stood up, pulling me with him. "We're leaving," he snarled, dragging me towards the door. My heart raced as I struggled to think of a way to stall him. Just as we reached the door, the police car screeched to a halt outside. Officers jumped out, their guns drawn. "Drop the knife," one of them shouted. Jake froze, his eyes wild with fear and anger. He tightened his grip on my arm, the knife pressed against my throat. "Stay back," he screamed. "I'll kill him." "Let him go," the officer said calmly, inching closer. "We can talk this out." I could feel Jake's panic rising. His grip loosened slightly, and I took my chance. I elbowed him hard in the ribs, causing him to stumble back. The officers moved in, tackling him to the ground. I collapsed to my knees, gasping for breath as they handcuffed him. The waitress rushed over, helping me to my feet. "You okay, hon?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, still in shock. "Yeah, I think so. Thanks for calling the police." The officers led Jake away, and I watched as they put him in the back of the squad car. Relief washed over me, but I knew it would be a long time before I felt safe on the road again. I arrived at the motel just past midnight, weary from a long day of driving. The neon sign flickered, casting an eerie glow on the rain-slicked pavement. It was the only place for miles, and I had no choice but to stay there for the night. The manager, a wiry man in his 50s, greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Welcome to Meadowview Motel," he said, his voice oily. "How long will you be staying?" "Just one night," I replied, handing over my credit card. His eyes lingered on me a moment too long, making my skin crawl. "Room 7, he said, sliding the key across the counter. "Enjoy your stay." I took the key and hurried to my room, grateful to escape his unsettling gaze. The room was small and shabby, but it would do. I locked the door behind me and set my suitcase on the bed. As I unpacked, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I told myself it was just my imagination, a result of exhaustion and nerves. But the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I decided to take a shower, hoping the hot water would help me relax. The bathroom was even dingier than the bedroom, with cracked tiles and a rust-stained sink. I undressed and stepped under the spray, letting the warmth wash away the tension. But even in the shower, I couldn't shake the unease. I kept glancing at the small, grimy window, half expecting to see a face peering in. The water did little to soothe my nerves. After drying off and changing into my pajamas, I crawled into bed and turned on the TV. The flickering light cast strange shadows on the walls, and I found myself jumping at every little noise. That's when I noticed it, a small, red light blinking in the corner of the room. My heart skipped a beat. I got up to investigate and found a tiny camera hidden in a potted plant. Panic surged through me. Someone was watching me. I ripped the camera out and threw it on the floor, my mind racing. I had to get out of there. But where could I go? It was the middle of the night, and the nearest town was miles away. I felt trapped, like a caged animal. I decided to confront the manager. I grabbed my coat and stormed to the office, my fear turning to anger. How dare he invade my privacy like this? The office door was locked, and the lights were off. I pounded on the door, shouting for him to come out, but there was no answer. The only sound was the rain, drumming relentlessly on the roof. I went back to my room, my anger giving way to a deep, cold fear. What if there were more cameras? What if he was watching me right now, laughing at my helplessness? I searched the room, tearing it apart in my desperation. I found 3 more cameras, one in the smoke detector, one in the alarm clock, and one in the air vent. Each discovery made me feel more violated. I smashed the cameras and sat on the bed, trembling. I had to leave, but I was too afraid to go outside. I felt like a haunted animal, with no escape. Suddenly, the phone rang. I jumped, my heart pounding in my chest. I picked it up with a shaking hand. "Hello?" "You shouldn't have done that," the manager's voice said, cold and menacing. "Now you've made things worse for yourself." I slammed the phone down, my hands shaking. He was watching me, even now. I had to get out of there. I grabbed my suitcase and bolted for the door. As I stepped outside, the rain soaked through my clothes, chilling me to the bone. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys in my panic. I glanced back at the motel office and saw the manager standing in the window, watching me with a sinister smile. I finally got the door open and jumped inside, locking the doors behind me. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely start the engine. I floored the gas pedal, speeding away from the motel. As I drove down the dark, empty road, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the manager's car following me. But there was nothing. Just the rain and the darkness. I drove for what felt like hours, my mind racing. What if he had my credit card information? What if he knew where I lived? The fear was suffocating. Eventually, I found a rest stop and pulled over, my body shaking with adrenaline and exhaustion. I needed to call the police, but my phone had no signal. I was completely alone. I locked the doors and curled up in the back seat, trying to stay calm. I had to wait until morning, when I could find help. But sleep was impossible. Every noise, every shadow, made my heart race. The hours dragged on, and the rain never let up. I felt like I was in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The memory of the manager's voice haunted me, his cold threat echoing in my mind. Finally, the sky began to lighten, and I knew I had to move. I started the car and drove to the nearest town, praying I would find a police station. When I arrived, I stumbled into the station, drenched and exhausted. The officer at the desk looked at me with concern. "Can I help you?" I told him everything, my voice shaking. He listened patiently, then called in another officer. They promised to investigate, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. They took my statement and sent me to a nearby hotel, a much nicer place than the Meadowview Motel. I was too exhausted to argue. I needed sleep, and I needed to feel safe. As I lay in the soft, clean bed, I tried to calm my mind. The police would handle it. The manager would be caught. But the fear lingered, gnawing at me. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to put the experience behind me. But every time I stayed in a hotel, I couldn't help but search for hidden cameras. The paranoia was a constant shadow. The police never found enough evidence to charge the manager. The cameras had been wiped clean, no fingerprints, no trace of his involvement. He got away with it. But I knew the truth. I knew what he had done, and it haunted me. Every time I saw a potted plant, a smoke detector, an alarm clock, I felt his eyes on me. And I knew I would never truly feel safe again. I had always been fascinated by abandoned places, relics of a time long gone. The thrill of urban exploration was my escape from the mundane. Tonight, I decided to explore an old factory on the outskirts of the city, a place I had scouted for weeks. The factory loomed in the moonlight, its broken windows and crumbling walls giving it a haunting presence. I parked my car a safe distance away and approached on foot, the cool night air nipping at my skin. The gate was rusted but unlocked, creaking ominously as I pushed it open. I slipped inside, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the cracked pavement. The silence was almost oppressive, broken only by the distant hum of the city. I made my way to the main entrance, stepping carefully over debris. The door hung ajar, inviting me in. I took a deep breath and entered, my flashlight revealing a cavernous space filled with forgotten machinery and scattered papers. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of rust and decay was overpowering. I moved deeper into the factory, my footsteps echoing in the vast emptiness. It was both exhilarating and unnerving to be completely alone in such a place. As I explored, I took photos of the graffiti-covered walls and the derelict equipment. Each snapshot was a piece of history, a moment frozen in time. I felt a rush of excitement with every discovery, every new corner turned. I found a staircase leading to the upper floors and decided to climb it. The metal steps groaned under my weight, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety. What if the structure wasn't as stable as it seemed? Reaching the second floor, I was greeted by a series of offices, their windows shattered and desks overturned. It was clear that this place had been abandoned in a hurry, left to the ravages of time and neglect. I wandered through the offices, imagining the lives of those who had worked here. What had they done when the factory was still operational? What stories did these walls hold? Suddenly, I heard a faint noise, a shuffling sound coming from down the hall. My heart skipped a beat. I turned off my flashlight and listened, straining to hear. The noise grew louder, accompanied by hushed voices. I ducked into an office and hid behind a desk, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Peeking out, I saw shadows moving in the hallway. My mind raced. Who else was here? Other explorers? Or something more sinister? The voices drew closer, and I could make out snippets of conversation. "Did you hear that?" one of them said. "Someone's here." Panic surged through me. These were not fellow explorers. They sounded angry, hostile. I had to get out of there. I waited until the voices moved past, then crept out of the office and back towards the staircase. Every step felt like it echoed through the entire building, amplifying my fear. As I reached the top of the stairs, I glanced back and saw them. A group of squatters, their faces twisted with anger and suspicion. They spotted me and yelled, their voices harsh and threatening. I bolted down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. They chased after me, their footsteps heavy and fast. I could hear their curses, their threats. I had to get out before they caught me. I reached the ground floor and sprinted towards the exit, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. I could feel them closing in, their presence like a dark cloud over my shoulder. The gate was in sight, but it felt like a mile away. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning with the effort. I had never run so fast in my life, driven by sheer terror. Just as I reached the gate, one of them grabbed my arm. I twisted and swung my flashlight, hitting him in the face. He let go with a grunt of pain, and I kept running, not looking back. I burst through the gate and ran to my car, fumbling with the keys. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock the door. I jumped in and started the engine, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror. They were still coming, but I didn't wait to see how close they got. I floored the gas pedal and sped away, the factory shrinking in the distance. My heart was racing, my mind reeling from the close call. As I drove, I couldn't shake the image of their faces, the anger and desperation in their eyes. What had I stumbled into? Why were they so hostile? Questions swirled in my mind, but I had no answers. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to calm down. The city lights eventually came into view, a stark contrast to the darkness I had just escaped. I found a parking lot and pulled over, my hands still trembling. I sat there for a long time, replaying the events in my mind. I had never felt such fear, such a primal need to survive. It was a stark reminder of the dangers of urban exploration, the risks I had always known but never truly faced. I decided to go home, my adventure cut short by the encounter. As I drove, I thought about what I had learned. The thrill of exploration was still there, but it was tempered by a newfound respect for the dangers lurking in the shadows. When I finally reached my apartment, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I was safe, for now. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to steady my breathing. The events of the night played over and over in my mind, making sleep impossible. I kept thinking about the squatters, their anger, their desperation. What had driven them to such hostility? What were they hiding? I decided to do some research on the factory. I spent the next few days digging through old records and news articles, trying to piece together its history. What I found was unsettling. The factory had been abandoned for over a decade, a casualty of the city's economic decline. It had become a haven for squatters, drug users, and other desperate individuals. There had been reports of violence, even murder. The more I learned, the more I understood the danger I had been in. The factory was a dark, forgotten place, a refuge for those who had nowhere else to go. I had intruded on their territory, their home. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something much worse. The memory of their faces, their voices, haunted me. I had seen a side of the city I had never known, a hidden world of fear and desperation. Despite the fear, I felt a strange pull to return, to understand more about the lives of those squatters. But I knew it was too dangerous. I had to be smarter, more cautious. I continued my urban explorations, but with a newfound respect for the places I ventured into. I always made sure to research thoroughly, to understand the risks and prepare for the unexpected. The experience at the factory had changed me. I was more aware, more cautious, but also more determined. There were stories to be uncovered, histories to be revealed, but they had to be approached with care. I had come to this remote cabin in the woods seeking solitude, a place where I could finally finish my novel without distractions. The isolation was perfect, the silence only broken by the occasional rustling of leaves or the call of a distant owl. The cabin was small but cozy, with a fireplace, a desk, and a comfortable bed. I spent my days writing furiously, my inspiration flowing in the tranquility. At night, I would sit by the fire, sipping tea and reading. It was on one such night, the wind howling outside, that I heard the knock on the door. It was almost midnight, and the unexpected sound sent a shiver down my spine. Who could be out here at this hour? I hesitated, staring at the door, my heart pounding. Another knock, more insistent this time. I slowly approached and called out, "Who is it?" My car broke down. A man's voice responded. "Can you help me? I need to use your phone." His voice was calm, but something about it felt off. I peered through the peephole and saw a man standing there, his face partially hidden by the darkness. He looked normal enough, but the unease in my gut wouldn't go away. "I'm sorry, I don't have a phone," I lied. "The landline here is disconnected." I hoped he would just go away, but instead, he persisted. "Please, I just need to come in and warm up. It's freezing out here." His plea sounded desperate, but there was an edge to it that made me uneasy. I considered my options. Letting him in could be dangerous, but leaving him out there seemed heartless. I decided to offer a compromise. "I'll get you a blanket and some hot tea. Wait here." I locked the door behind me as I went to the kitchen. My hands were shaking as I prepared the tea, trying to keep my mind from spiraling into fear. I grabbed a blanket from the couch and went back to the door. When I opened it, he was closer than before, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. I handed him the blanket and tea through the small gap, trying to keep the door mostly closed. "Thank you," he said, but he didn't leave. Instead, he stood there, sipping the tea, his eyes never leaving mine. "Are you out here all alone?" he asked, his tone too casual. "No, my husband will be back soon," I lied again, hoping to deter any ill intentions he might have. His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. "That's good," he said, almost too quickly. "Wouldn't want to intrude." He took another sip of tea, then added, "Mind if I wait inside until he gets back? Just to warm up properly." My heart raced. I couldn't let him in. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you in. I'm sure help will come soon." I tried to sound firm, but my voice wavered. His expression hardened. "Look, I really need to come in. It's freezing out here." The polite veneer was slipping, revealing a more aggressive tone. "I'm sorry," I repeated, trying to close the door, but he wedged his foot in. Panic surged through me. "Please, just go." "I can't help you." "Open the door," he demanded, his voice low and menacing. The transformation was complete. The pretense of civility was gone. I slammed the door shut with all my strength, bolting it quickly. He pounded on it, shouting obscenities. My heart was racing, and I backed away, trying to think. The pounding stopped abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence. I didn't know if he had left or if he was still out there, lurking in the shadows. I grabbed my phone, cursing myself for lying about the landline. There was no signal out here. I was completely cut off. I had to find a way to protect myself. I searched the cabin for anything I could use as a weapon. I found a heavy flashlight and a kitchen knife, gripping them tightly as I huddled in the living room, every noise outside making me jump. Hours passed, and the tension was unbearable. I could hear occasional footsteps, twigs snapping, the crunch of leaves. He was still out there, watching, waiting. I considered making a run for it, but where would I go? The nearest town was miles away, and the woods were dark and unfamiliar. I felt trapped. Just when I thought I couldn't take the silence any longer, there was another knock, softer this time. "Please, let me in," he said, his voice different, almost pleading. I stayed silent, hoping he would think I had left or was asleep. The knocking continued, growing more insistent. I didn't move, barely breathing. Suddenly, the window shattered, and he climbed in, his eyes wild with anger. "I told you to let me in," he snarled, advancing toward me. I raised the flashlight and knife, my hands trembling. "Stay back," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I will use this." He laughed, a chilling sound. "You think that will stop me?" He lunged at me, and I swung the flashlight, hitting him in the face. He staggered back, cursing. I ran for the door, but he grabbed my arm, yanking me back. I slashed with the knife, catching his arm. He screamed in pain but didn't let go. In the struggle, we knocked over a lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I used the momentary confusion to break free and dashed out the door, running into the woods. The cold night air hit me like a wall, but I didn't stop. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the underbrush. My only thought was to get away, to survive. I ran blindly, branches scratching my face and arms, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could still hear him, getting closer. I had to find a place to hide. I spotted a large fallen tree and squeezed underneath it, trying to control my breathing. He ran past, cursing and shouting, not seeing me. I stayed hidden, praying he wouldn't find me. Hours passed, and the woods gradually grew silent. I waited until dawn before crawling out, exhausted and terrified but alive. I made my way to the nearest town and called the police, vowing never to seek solitude in the woods again. I was working the late shift at the diner, a quiet place off the main road that only got a few customers at night. Most of them were regulars, truck drivers passing through, and the occasional insomniac looking for a warm meal. It was usually peaceful, but that night felt different. Around midnight, a man walked in. He looked normal enough, in his mid-40s, wearing a worn-out jacket and jeans. He took a seat in the corner, his eyes scanning the place before settling on me. I gave him a menu and he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. He ordered a coffee and pie, and I went back to my tasks. At first, I didn't think much of him. But as the hours ticked by, he didn't leave. He just sat there, occasionally glancing at his watch, but mostly keeping his eyes on me. By 2 a.m., the diner was empty except for him. I wiped down the counters, trying to shake off the growing unease. Every time I looked up, he was watching me. I started to feel trapped, like a deer in headlights. I approached his table, trying to stay calm. "Can I get you anything else?" I asked, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. He shook his head, his eyes locking onto mine. "Just waiting," he said, his voice low and unsettling. My heart pounded in my chest. Waiting for what? Or who? I forced a smile and retreated to the counter, keeping a wary eye on him. The clock seemed to slow down, each minute dragging on painfully. Around 3 a.m., the diner phone rang. It was my boss checking in. I told him everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. When I hung up, the man was still there, his gaze more intense than ever. I decided to text my friend, who lived nearby. I needed someone to be aware of the situation. As I typed, I could feel his eyes burning into me. I sent the message and slipped my phone back into my pocket, praying for a response. The man finally stood up and walked to the door. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. He stopped, turned back, and walked towards me. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, his voice dripping with menace. I stammered out something about my shift ending soon. He smiled that cold, empty smile again and walked out. I watched him through the window, but he didn't leave. He just stood there, in the shadows, watching. My phone buzzed. It was my friend. She was on her way. I felt a bit of relief, but knew I still had to be careful. I kept busy, trying to appear normal, but my mind was racing. I needed to get out, but I couldn't just leave the diner unattended. Minutes felt like hours until my friend's car pulled into the parking lot. I grabbed my things and bolted for the door. The man stepped forward, but my friend honked the horn, startling him. I ran to the car, and we sped away, my heart pounding in my ears. As we drove off, I looked back. The man stood in the middle of the parking lot, watching us disappear into the night. I told my friend everything, my voice shaking. She took me to her place, and I called my boss, explaining the situation. The police were called, but the man was gone by the time they arrived. They took my statement and promised to keep an eye on the diner. I didn't sleep that night, the man's face haunting my thoughts. The next day, I went back to the diner with my boss. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I found myself glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see him there. Days turned into weeks, and I slowly returned to my routine. The man never came back, but the fear lingered. I started carrying pepper spray and took self-defense classes, determined not to feel helpless again. Life went on, but I was never the same. The experience left a scar, a constant reminder of how quickly things can turn dark. I still work the night shift, but I'm always on edge, always watching, and always waiting for the next time. The police never found the man, and I never found out what he wanted. But I learned to trust my instincts and to never underestimate the quiet danger that can lurk in the most ordinary places. I had to stay late at work again. The office was quiet, with most of my colleagues having left hours ago. The fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow over the cubicles, and the only sounds were the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional creak of the building. I glanced at the clock, 9:45 p.m. I saved my work, shut down my computer, and grabbed my briefcase. I made my way to the elevator, the metallic doors sliding open with a soft ding. The ride down was uneventful, but the quietness of the building was starting to get to me. When the doors opened to the parking garage, a chill ran down my spine. The space was dimly lit, with only a few flickering lights casting long shadows. I walked towards my car, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the empty garage. As I approached my car, I noticed a figure standing in the distance, partially obscured by shadows. He was just standing there, not moving. I felt a knot form in my stomach but tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just another late worker. I unlocked my car and got in, quickly locking the doors behind me. I started the engine and turned on the headlights. The figure was still there, watching me. I pulled out of my parking spot, keeping an eye on him in my rearview mirror. As I drove towards the exit, I saw him start to move, walking in my direction. I sped up a little, feeling a growing sense of unease. The exit gate was just ahead, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me as it opened. I drove out onto the street and headed home, glancing in my mirrors to make sure I wasn't being followed. The streets were mostly empty, and I started to calm down, convincing myself that it was just my imagination. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the car, sitting for a moment to collect myself. The house was dark, and I realized I had forgotten to leave any lights on. I got out of the car and headed to the front door, fumbling with my keys. As I unlocked the door, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. I shook my head, trying to brush off the feeling of being watched. I went inside, locked the door behind me, and turned on the lights. The house felt eerily quiet. I double-checked all the locks and windows, making sure everything was secure. I tried to relax, but the feeling of unease wouldn't go away. I went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I kept hearing noises, creaks and groans that seemed louder than usual. I finally drifted off, only to be woken by a loud bang. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to hear any other sounds. The house was silent again. The next morning, I felt exhausted. I told myself it was just stress from work and that I needed to relax. The day went by in a blur, and soon enough, I found myself staying late at the office again. This time, I was more on edge. As I made my way to the parking garage, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The garage was just as empty and dimly lit as the night before. I walked quickly to my car, trying to ignore the feeling of being watched. As I got in, I saw the same figure from the night before, standing in the shadows. This time, he started walking towards me as soon as I turned on the car. I panicked and sped out of the garage, my heart racing. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to calm down. I didn't want to go home and be alone in the dark house. I finally decided to drive to a nearby diner that was open 24 hours. I needed to be around people to feel safe. I parked my car and went inside. The bright lights and noise of the diner a welcome relief. I ordered a coffee and sat in a booth, trying to collect my thoughts. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed a man sitting at the counter, staring at me. My heart sank. It was him. I pretended not to notice, but I could feel his eyes on me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't stay in the diner all night, but I was too scared to leave. I tried to think of a plan, but my mind was racing. After what felt like an eternity, the man got up and walked towards the exit. I watched him leave, feeling a mix of relief and fear. I waited a few more minutes, then quickly paid my bill and left. I got in my car and drove home, constantly checking my mirrors. When I got home, I parked in the driveway, got out, and quickly went inside. I locked the door behind me and checked all the windows again. I decided to call the police and report the man. I told them about the past 2 nights and how he seemed to be following me. They said they would send a patrol car to check the area and told me to stay inside and call them if I saw anything suspicious. I tried to sleep, but every little noise kept me awake. I kept my phone by my side, ready to call the police if I needed to. Eventually, exhaustion took over and I fell into a restless sleep. The next day, I was still on edge. I decided to take a different route to work, hoping to avoid the man. The day went by slowly, and I couldn't focus on anything. I kept thinking about the man and what he wanted. When it was time to leave, I asked a colleague to walk with me to the parking garage. I didn't want to be alone again. We got to my car without incident, and I thanked my colleague for the help. I drove home, constantly checking my mirrors. When I got home, I parked and quickly went inside, locking the door behind me. I tried to relax, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. I decided to stay with a friend for a few days, hoping that the man would lose interest if he couldn't find me. The next few days were a blur of fear and anxiety. I stayed with my friend and tried to avoid being alone. I kept checking in with the police, but they had no new information. I felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the man to appear. Eventually, the sightings stopped. I started to relax a little, but the fear never fully went away. I still stayed with my friend, too scared to go back to my own house. The night was still, the air crisp and cool as I settled into my sleeping bag. I had always loved the serenity of solo camping, the solitude offering a perfect escape from the chaos of everyday life. The forest around me was a dark mass of shadows, the only sounds the rustling of leaves and the distant call of an owl. I breathed deeply, savoring the scent of pine and earth. My campsite was modest, just a small tent, a crackling fire, and a few essentials. It was perfect. The firelight danced on the fabric of my tent, creating comforting patterns as I drifted off to sleep. Sometime in the night, I awoke with a start. It was one of those moments where you're not sure if a noise had woken you or if you just surfaced from a dream. I lay still, listening intently. Silence. Not even the chirping of crickets. A shiver ran down my spine. I told myself it was nothing, just the quiet of the forest, but a gnawing unease kept me alert. I sat up slowly, unzipping my sleeping bag and straining my ears. There was something off, a tension in the air that I couldn't quite place. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows that seemed to move and shift on their own. I reached for my flashlight, flicking it on and sweeping it around the tent. My heart skipped a beat. My campsite was a mess. The food supplies I had hung from a tree were scattered on the ground, my backpack overturned, and my belongings strewn about. Someone had been here. I could feel it. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, a cold dread seeping into my bones. I wasn't alone. I grabbed my knife, the small but sharp blade offering a sliver of comfort. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to take a deep breath and step out of the tent. The night was dark, the moon barely a sliver in the sky. My flashlight beam cut through the blackness, revealing the extent of the chaos around me. I crouched low, inspecting the ground. There were footprints in the dirt, leading away from the campsite and into the forest. Someone had deliberately ransacked my camp. A twig snapped. I spun around, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice barely more than a whisper. No response. Just the oppressive silence of the forest. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I decided to follow the footprints, moving cautiously and keeping my flashlight trained on the ground. Each step felt like an eternity, the darkness pressing in around me. The tracks led deeper into the woods, to a dense thicket. I paused, my breath catching as I noticed something glinting in the flashlight beam. It was a necklace, a small silver pendant I recognized as mine. I hadn't even noticed it was missing. Whoever had taken it had dropped it here, almost as if they wanted me to find it. A sense of dread washed over me. This was no random act. Someone was playing a game with me, and I was the unwitting participant. I heard breathing. Soft, almost imperceptible, but definitely there. My flashlight beam wavered as I tried to locate the source. A shadow moved, just at the edge of my vision. I swung the light towards it, catching a glimpse of something, a face, pale and staring. My blood ran cold. It was a man, his eyes wide and unblinking, watching me from the darkness. He didn't move, just stood there, staring. "What do you want?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. He said nothing, his gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I took a step back, clutching my knife tightly. The man remained still, his eyes following my every move. There was something deeply unsettling about him. Without warning, he turned and melted into the shadows, disappearing as silently as he had appeared. I stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. My instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of there, but I couldn't leave my gear behind. I needed to pack up and get to safety. I hurried back to the campsite, my every sense on high alert. The fire had almost died completely, the embers glowing faintly. I worked quickly, gathering my scattered belongings and stuffing them into my backpack. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the man watching me again. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs underfoot. My nerves were frayed, every movement a jolt to my system. Finally, I was ready. I hoisted my backpack, extinguished the fire, and started towards the trail that would lead me back to my car. The forest was a maze of shadows, the path barely visible in the weak light of my flashlight. I moved as quickly as I dared, my knife still clutched in my hand. The feeling of being watched never left me. I could sense eyes on me, tracking my progress through the trees. It was unnerving, like a predator stalking its prey. I stumbled once, my foot catching on a root, and nearly fell. Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to keep going, to stay focused. After what felt like hours, I finally saw the faint outline of my car through the trees. Relief washed over me, but I didn't slow down. I reached the car, fumbling with the keys in my haste. I glanced back once more, half expecting to see the man emerging from the forest. But there was nothing, just darkness and silence. I climbed into the car, locking the doors and starting the engine. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. The night was quiet, my apartment bathed in the soft glow of the city lights outside. I had just finished a long day at work and was ready to unwind with a glass of wine and a good book. I sank into my couch, letting the tension of the day melt away. The rhythmic hum of the city was oddly comforting, a constant background noise that made me feel less alone. Just as I was getting lost in my book, my phone rang. I glanced at the clock, 10:30 p.m. It was late for a call, but not unusual. I picked up, expecting to hear a friend's voice on the other end. "Hello?" I answered, my voice casual. There was silence, then a soft, almost inaudible breathing. My heart skipped a beat. "Who is this?" I asked, a bit more firmly. Still no response. I hung up, brushing it off as a wrong number. I tried to return to my book, but the unease lingered, gnawing at the back of my mind. Minutes later, the phone rang again. I hesitated before picking it up. "Hello?" I repeated, my voice now tinged with irritation. A low chuckle echoed through the line. "Did you enjoy your wine?" a male voice asked, smooth and cold. My blood ran cold. How did he know that? "Who are you?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you want?" The caller laughed softly. "I just wanted to chat, Rachel." "Is that so wrong?" The mention of my name sent a shiver down my spine. I hung up again, my hands trembling. This was no ordinary prank call. Whoever it was, they knew me, knew details about my life. I checked the locks on my doors and windows, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable. I tried to focus on my book, but my mind was racing. Who could it be? A coworker? Someone from my past? I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. An hour passed without incident. Just as I started to relax, the phone rang once more. I stared at it, dread pooling in my stomach. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't ignore it either. "Why are you doing this?" I asked as soon as I picked up. The caller's silence was deafening. "You shouldn't ignore your mail," he said finally. "There are important things in there." My heart pounded in my chest. I hadn't checked my mailbox in days. "What do you want from me?" I pleaded. The line went dead. I stood there, clutching the phone, fear gripping me tight. I decided to call the police, but they were less than helpful. Without a clear threat, There wasn't much they could do. I felt a sense of helplessness wash over me. The next day at work, I couldn't concentrate. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart skipped a beat. The calls didn't come during the day, but I knew they would start again once night fell. That evening, I checked my mailbox. There was nothing unusual, just the usual bills and advertisements. I sighed, feeling paranoid and foolish. As night fell, I braced myself. The phone rang just after 10 p.m. My hands shook as I answered. "What do you want?" I demanded. "I see you found nothing," he said. "But that doesn't mean there's nothing to find." His voice was like ice, sending chills down my spine. "Leave me alone," I said, my voice cracking. "I'll call the police." He laughed again. "Go ahead. They won't help you. They never do." The line went dead. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. The calls continued every night, each one more unnerving than the last. He mentioned things he couldn't possibly know, private details about my life, my family, my friends. I stopped sleeping, the constant fear gnawing at me. Every shadow seemed sinister, every creak of the apartment filled me with dread. I installed a security system, hoping it would give me some peace of mind. But the calls continued, the caller always one step ahead. One night, he said something that froze my blood. "You look so peaceful when you sleep." I hadn't slept in days. How did he know? I called the police again, begging them to help me. They promised to increase patrols in my area, but it did little to ease my fear. I started noticing things out of place in my apartment, small, subtle changes that I couldn't be sure were real. Was he getting inside? Desperation set in. I considered moving, changing my number, anything to escape this nightmare. But I knew he would find me. He always did. One night, I finally broke. "What do you want from me?" I screamed into the phone. His response was chillingly calm. "I want you to understand that you're never alone. I'm always with you, Rachel. Always." The line went dead, and I collapsed into tears. I decided to stay with a friend, hoping the change of location would help. But the calls followed me there, the caller's knowledge of my life disturbingly accurate. One night at my friend's place, the phone rang again. I didn't answer. I couldn't. But the voicemail he left was worse. "You can't run from me, Rachel. I'll always find you." I felt trapped, my life spiraling out of control. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't function. The fear was all-consuming. One final call came, late at night. "I'm done with you," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But remember, Rachel, I'll always be watching." The line went dead, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a twisted sense of relief. But deep down, I knew he wasn't gone. The evening air was thick with humidity as I pulled up to the old, isolated house at the edge of town. It was a late showing, unusual but not unheard of in my line of work. The client insisted on seeing the property after sunset due to his busy schedule. I glanced at my watch, 8:45 p.m. The sky was already a deep indigo, stars beginning to dot the horizon. I parked my car and grabbed my flashlight, noting the dilapidated state of the house. It was a fixer-upper, no doubt, but with potential. My client, Mr. Jameson, arrived shortly after. We exchanged pleasantries and made our way to the front door. The creaking hinges and peeling paint added to the house's eerie ambience. Inside, the house was dark, the air stale and heavy. I flipped the light switch, but nothing happened. Must be the wiring, I muttered, pulling out my flashlight. No worries, Mr. Jameson said with a tight smile. I brought my own flashlight too. He clicked it on, casting a narrow beam of light across the dusty living room. We started the tour, moving from room to room. The house was bigger than it seemed from the outside, with a maze of hallways and small, interconnected rooms. As we descended into the basement, the air grew colder. This could be a great space for a wine cellar, I suggested, trying to lighten the mood. Mr. Jameson seemed uninterested, his attention focused elsewhere. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to be there. We finished the tour, and I locked up the house. Thank you for your time, Mr. Jameson said, his tone curt. He hurried to his car and drove off, leaving me alone. I sighed, feeling a bit uneasy. The house had an unsettling vibe, and I was eager to leave. I got into my car and started the engine, but it sputtered and died. Not now, I groaned, turning the key again. Nothing. I grabbed my phone to call for a tow, but there was no signal. Of course. With no other option, I decided to walk to the nearest gas station. It wasn't far, just a mile or so down the road. I grabbed my flashlight and set off. The road was dark and deserted, lined with tall trees that cast long shadows in the moonlight. I walked briskly, the silence only broken by the occasional rustle of leaves. Halfway there, I noticed a group of teenagers standing under a streetlight. They were talking in low voices, their laughter echoing eerily through the night. I tried to walk past them unnoticed, but one of them called out, "Hey, mister, you lost?" The tone was friendly, but something about it made my skin crawl. Just heading to the gas station, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Car trouble. That's a shame, another teenager said, stepping forward. He had a sinister grin on his face. This isn't the safest place at night. I forced a smile, hoping to diffuse any tension. I'll be fine. Thanks for the concern. They exchanged glances, a silent communication that made my heart race. Why don't we help you? The first teenager suggested. It's dangerous to be alone out here. I appreciate it, but I can manage, I said, taking a step back. Their presence felt suffocating, the night growing colder around us. We insist, the leader said, his grin widening. The others moved closer, forming a loose circle around me. Panic set in. Really, it's okay, I stammered, turning to leave. But one of them grabbed my arm, his grip tight and unyielding. You're not going anywhere, he hissed, his friendly facade dropping. The others laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. I yanked my arm free, backing away. What do you want? I demanded, my voice shaking. Just a bit of fun, the leader said, pulling out a knife. The blade glinted in the moonlight, and my heart pounded in my chest. Leave me alone, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I'll call the police. No signal out here, one of them sneered. You're on your own, old man. Desperation kicked in, and I turned and ran. Their laughter followed me, along with the sound of their footsteps. The trees blurred past me as I sprinted down the road. I could hear them gaining on me, their taunts growing louder. I stumbled into a clearing, my flashlight beam wavering. Ahead, I saw an old, abandoned barn. I made a beeline for it, hoping to find shelter. Inside, the barn was dark and musty, filled with old farming equipment. I hid behind a stack of hay bales, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The teenagers entered, their flashlights sweeping the barn. Come out, wherever you are, one of them sing-songed, his voice echoing off the walls. I held my breath, my heart hammering in my chest. They were getting closer, their footsteps echoing ominously. Just when I thought they would find me, a siren wailed in the distance. The teenagers froze, then cursed under their breath. "Let's get out of here," the leader said. They retreated, their flashlights disappearing into the night. I stayed hidden for a while, waiting until I was sure they were gone. When I finally emerged, the night was silent again. I made my way back to the road, my mind racing. I would never forget their faces and the terror I felt that night. The night was eerily quiet as I sat in my new living room, the soft hum of the city a distant murmur. I had just moved to this quaint little house, hoping to leave my past behind and start anew. The scars of my previous life were still fresh. I had left everything behind to escape my abusive ex, Mark. This new city was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place where I could finally feel safe. The house was small, but cozy, filled with second-hand furniture that I had quickly gathered. It felt like a fresh start, a new beginning. I spent the evening unpacking, trying to settle in. The mundane task was a welcome distraction from the memories that haunted me. As the clock neared midnight, I decided to call it a night. I double-checked the locks on the doors and windows, a habit I couldn't shake even here. I climbed into bed, the unfamiliar creaks and groans of the house keeping me on edge. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I drifted into a fitful sleep. A noise woke me. I sat up, heart pounding. It was a soft scraping sound, like something or someone was outside my window. I held my breath, listening intently. The sound continued, intermittent and unnerving. I reached for my phone, but hesitated. Was I being paranoid? Creeping out of bed, I made my way to the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could see a shadow moving outside. My heart raced. Could it be him? Had he found me? I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. It had to be an animal or a neighbor. But the fear lingered. I pulled the curtain back slightly, just enough to peek outside. The moonlight cast long shadows, but I could make out a figure standing near the edge of my yard. It was him. Mark. I recognized his stance, the way he stood with an air of menace. My blood ran cold. I stepped back, heart hammering in my chest. How had he found me? I had taken every precaution, changed my name, moved to a different state. The scraping sound continued, now more insistent. He was trying to get in. Panic surged through me. I had to do something. I grabbed my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "Please, someone is trying to break into my house," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. The operator's voice was calm, reassuring. "Stay on the line, officers are on their way." I clung to those words, hoping they would arrive in time. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, every noise amplified in the silence. I could hear Mark muttering outside, his voice sending chills down my spine. I moved to the living room, where I could see the front door. The lock held firm, but I knew it wouldn't hold forever. Headlights flashed outside, followed by the sound of car doors slamming. Relief washed over me as I saw the police officers approaching. Mark's figure disappeared into the shadows, retreating into the darkness. The officers knocked on the door, and I rushed to let them in. They swept through the house, checking every room and window. "He's gone," one of them said, but the fear in my chest remained. "Do you know who it was?" the officer asked. I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. "My ex. He found me." They took my statement, assuring me they would patrol the area and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. But the thought of Mark lurking nearby kept me on edge. The next few nights, I barely slept. Every noise, every shadow seemed sinister. I kept my phone close, ready to call for help at a moment's notice. I installed new locks, added extra security measures, and even got a dog for protection. But the feeling of being watched never left me. One evening, as I was locking up, I saw a familiar figure at the end of the street. He stood under a street lamp, just watching. My blood ran cold. I quickly locked the door and called the police. They arrived swiftly, but by then, Mark was gone again. The officers advised me to consider a restraining order, but I knew it wouldn't stop him. He was relentless, obsessed. I felt trapped, my new life overshadowed by the fear of Mark's return. I couldn't go back to my old life, but I couldn't move forward either. One night, I heard a noise at my window again. I grabbed my phone and the baseball bat I kept by my bed, ready to defend myself. This time, the police caught him. He was arrested for violating a restraining order that hadn't even been filed yet. I felt a twisted sense of relief. In the days that followed, I went through the legal process, obtaining the restraining order and pressing charges. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. Mark was behind bars, but the fear remained. I knew he could be released, that he might come after me again. But for now, I felt a sliver of safety. I took each day as it came, slowly rebuilding my sense of security. Therapy helped, as did the support of friends and the community. The scars of the past would always be there, but I was determined not to let them define me. The school day had been long and grueling, the kind that made me grateful for the solace of a quiet drive home. The clock on my dashboard read 10:15 p.m. as I pulled out of the parking lot, the last teacher to leave. The streets were empty, the glow of streetlights casting eerie shadows on the pavement. I turned up the radio, letting the soft melodies fill the car, hoping to shake off the fatigue clinging to me. I was about halfway home when I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. At first, I thought nothing of it. The road was a common route, and it wasn't unusual to see other cars. The car behind me seemed to get closer, its headlights almost blinding in my mirror. I squinted, trying to focus on the road ahead, but the lights kept glaring. I switched lanes, hoping to let the car pass. Instead, it mirrored my move, staying directly behind me. My heart began to race, a trickle of unease creeping in. The headlights flashed, bright and insistent. My pulse quickened. Was something wrong with my car? I checked the dashboard, no warning lights, no signs of trouble. I glanced in the rearview mirror, trying to make out the driver, but the glare obscured my view. The car flashed its lights again, more aggressively this time. My hands tightened on the wheel. Maybe it was a mistake. I slowed down slightly, giving the driver a chance to overtake me. Instead, they slowed down too, maintaining their position. Panic bubbled up inside me. This wasn't normal. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a prank or something more sinister? I had heard stories of drivers being forced off the road by strangers with malicious intent. I tried to stay calm, breathing deeply to steady my nerves. I increased my speed, hoping to lose them. The car behind me sped up too, tailgating dangerously close. My heart pounded in my chest. I had to think of a plan. The nearest police station was still miles away, and there weren't many exits on this stretch of road. I took a deep breath and decided to test their intentions. I signaled and took the next exit, hoping it would lead to a more populated area. The car followed, unwavering. The exit led to a narrow, winding road, surrounded by dense trees. The isolation that usually comforted me now felt menacing. The car stayed close, its lights still flashing. Fear gripped me. I dialed 911, keeping my eyes on the road. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was a lifeline in the darkness. Someone is following me, I said, my voice shaking. They're trying to force me off the road. I don't know what to do. Stay calm, the operator replied. Can you see any landmarks? Where are you right now? I scanned the road. I just took the exit off Highway 67. I'm on a narrow road, lots of trees. There's a sign for Pinewood Estates coming up. Help is on the way, the operator assured me. Keep driving, stay on the line, and don't stop. The car behind me flashed its lights again, more aggressively. My grip on the wheel tightened, knuckles white. They're getting closer, I whispered, panic rising. You're doing great, the operator said. Just keep moving. Officers are en route. I took another turn, hoping to confuse the driver. The road twisted and turned, but they stayed with me, relentless. Up ahead, I saw a gas station, a small, dimly lit beacon of hope. I floored the accelerator, making a beeline for the light. I pulled into the gas station, parking as close to the entrance as possible. I jumped out of the car, running inside. The clerk looked up, startled. Help me, I gasped. Someone's following me. He nodded, eyes wide. I'll call the police. He picked up the phone, speaking quickly. I peered outside, heart pounding. The car had stopped at the entrance of the gas station, its headlights still on. The driver didn't get out. The minutes stretched on. I felt exposed, vulnerable, every second an eternity. The clerk tried to reassure me, but his own fear was palpable. Finally, flashing red and blue lights appeared in the distance. Relief washed over me as the police cars pulled into the station. Officers approached the car, guns drawn. The driver remained inside, unresponsive. After a tense standoff, they pulled him out, a middle-aged man with a wild look in his eyes. Ma'am, are you okay? One of the officers asked, guiding me to sit down. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. Do you know him? Another officer asked, glancing back at the man who was now in handcuffs. No, I said, shaking my head. I've never seen him before. They took my statement, assuring me that they would investigate further. The man was taken away, still muttering to himself, his eyes darting around wildly. The officers escorted me home, making sure I felt safe. They promised to patrol the area and keep an eye out for any suspicious activity. That night, sleep eluded me. The darkness felt suffocating, the silence oppressive. Every noise, every shadow seemed to hold a new threat. The office was eerily quiet as I sat at my desk, the soft hum of computers and the distant ticking of the wall clock the only sounds in the building. It was well past 10 p.m., and I was the last one left, working on a system update that had to be completed before morning. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, casting long, unsettling shadows across the cubicles. I stretched, trying to shake off the fatigue that was creeping in after a long day. My phone buzzed, a text from my wife asking when I'd be home. Just another hour, I replied, hoping it would be true. These late-night updates were part of the job, but they always made her worry. As I returned to my work, I heard a faint noise, a soft creak, like a door opening. I paused, listening intently, Nothing followed, and I shrugged it off as the building settling. The minutes ticked by, and I became absorbed in my task, the glow of the monitor the only light in the room. Suddenly, I heard it again, a quiet, deliberate sound, like footsteps. My heart skipped a beat. The security team usually did a sweep around this time, but it was too early for that. I stood up, peering over the top of my cubicle, but saw no one. I tried to focus on my work, telling myself it was just my imagination. The silence was oppressive, every small sound amplified in the empty office. The footsteps returned, louder this time, echoing through the corridors. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone was definitely there. I grabbed my phone, debating whether to call security. I decided to investigate first, not wanting to overreact. I left my desk, moving quietly through the rows of cubicles. The office was a maze, each turn revealing empty desks and darkened screens. I reached the main corridor, the sound of footsteps growing louder. I rounded a corner and froze. There, at the far end of the hallway, a shadowy figure stood. My breath caught in my throat as the figure turned and disappeared into one of the rooms. I approached cautiously, my mind racing. Who could it be? A janitor, perhaps. But they never worked this late. My unease grew with each step. I reached the door where the figure had vanished and peeked inside. The room was dark, filled with storage boxes and old equipment. There was no one there. I felt a presence behind me, and I spun around, heart pounding. The hallway was empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. My phone buzzed again, this time a call from security. I answered quickly. "Is everything all right, Mr. Parker? We noticed some unusual activity on the cameras." "I think someone's here," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I saw someone in the building." "Stay where you are," the guard instructed. "We're on our way." I hung up, trying to calm my nerves. The minutes dragged by, each second filled with dread. The footsteps had stopped, but the silence was even more unnerving. I decided to head back to my desk, feeling safer near my workstation. As I approached, I saw something that made my blood run cold. My monitor was off, and my chair was turned away from the desk. I knew I had left everything as it was. Someone had been at my station. I felt a wave of panic. I backed away, bumping into a filing cabinet. A soft chuckle echoed through the office, sending shivers down my spine. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The chuckle grew louder, more menacing. "You don't remember me, do you?" a voice replied, cold and filled with malice. It was a voice I recognized, but hadn't heard in months. "Kevin?" I stammered. Kevin had been fired 6 months ago for misconduct. He had been volatile, unpredictable. And now he was back. "You took everything from me," he hissed, stepping out of the shadows. His eyes were wild, filled with a dangerous glint. "I'm here to return the favor." I tried to reason with him, my mind racing for a way out. "Kevin, you need to leave. Security is on their way." "Too late for that," he snarled, pulling a knife from his jacket. The blade gleamed in the dim light, and my heart pounded in my chest. I backed away slowly, trying to keep the distance between us. "It doesn't have to be like this," I pleaded. "We can talk." Kevin laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Talk? Talking didn't save my job. Talking didn't save my family." I glanced around, looking for anything I could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on a heavy stapler on the desk. In a sudden move, I grabbed the stapler and hurled it at him. He dodged, but it gave me a split second to run. I sprinted down the hallway, hearing his footsteps close behind. My mind raced with escape routes, but the building felt like a labyrinth. I burst into the stairwell, taking the steps two at a time. I could hear Kevin's manic laughter echoing off the walls. Just as I reached the ground floor, the front doors flew open and security rushed in. They tackled Kevin, disarming him before he could react. Relief washed over me, my legs giving way as I sank to the floor. The nightmare was over, but the fear lingered. The old train station was a photographer's dream, abandoned, crumbling, and soaked in history. The perfect setting for my next project. I arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. I parked my car near the entrance, the only vehicle in sight. The station loomed ahead, a relic of a bygone era. Graffiti marred its once grand facade, but it only added to the sense of decay I wanted to capture. I grabbed my camera bag and tripod, stepping carefully over broken glass and debris as I made my way inside. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of mildew clung to the walls. The fading light filtered through shattered windows, creating eerie patterns on the floor. I set up my equipment, eager to catch the last rays of daylight. As I began snapping photos, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I brushed it off as nerves. This place was unsettling, but I was here for the perfect shot. I moved deeper into the station, exploring the abandoned ticket booths and waiting areas. Each corner revealed a new scene of desolation, perfect for my project. In the dim light, I spotted a flicker of movement. My heart skipped a beat, but I told myself it was just a rat or a stray cat. Still, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder. The wind whistled through the broken windows, creating a haunting melody. I took a deep breath, focusing on my work. The light was fading fast, and I needed to make the most of it. Just as I captured a particularly striking shot, I heard voices, low, murmuring, and drawing closer. I froze, listening intently. The voices grew louder, more distinct. I could make out angry tones, words filled with malice. Panic gripped me. I wasn't alone. I packed up my gear quickly, trying to stay calm. As I turned to leave, I saw them, a group of figures emerging from the shadows, their eyes fixed on me. They were vagrants, their clothes tattered and dirty, faces hardened by life on the streets. They moved with purpose, surrounding me. "What are you doing here?" one of them snarled, his voice rough and threatening. I took a step back, my heart racing. "Just taking pictures," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I didn't mean to disturb anything. Another man stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "This is our place. We don't want you here." I glanced around, looking for an escape route. The exit was behind them, blocked by their menacing stances. "I'll leave," I said quickly, raising my hands in a gesture of peace. I didn't know anyone was here. "I'll just go." They didn't move, their eyes glinting in the fading light. "You think you can just walk in here, take your pictures, and leave?" the first man growled. Fear clawed at me. I had no idea what they wanted, but I knew I was in danger. "I'm sorry," I said again, my voice trembling. "I'll delete the photos if you want." "Too late for that," another man said, stepping closer. He reached out, grabbing my camera. "Let's see what you've got." I tried to pull away, but his grip was strong. "Please," I begged, "it's just photos. Nothing important." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Important to you, maybe. Not to us." He yanked the camera from my hands, smashing it against the wall. I gasped, tears stinging my eyes. Months of work gone in an instant. But my safety was more important. I had to get out of there. The men closed in, their intentions clear. I was cornered, no way out. Desperation surged through me. I spotted a gap between two of them and made a run for it. My heart pounded as I darted past, sprinting for the exit. Rough hands grabbed me, pulling me back. I fought, kicking and screaming, but they were too strong. They dragged me to the ground, pinning me down. "You shouldn't have come here," one of them hissed in my ear. "Please," I sobbed, "I'll do anything. Just let me go." One of them pulled out a knife, its blade glinting ominously. "We don't like trespassers," he said, his voice cold. I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then a shout rang out, echoing through the station. "What's going on here?" a voice demanded. The men paused, looking up. I opened my eyes to see a security guard standing in the doorway, flashlight in hand. Relief flooded me as the guard approached, his presence a lifeline. "Get away from her," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. The vagrants hesitated, then scattered, melting back into the shadows. The guard helped me to my feet, his grip firm and reassuring. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes filled with concern. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice shaking. As we left the station together, I knew I would never return. The photos were lost, but I had my life. That was all that mattered. The storm had been brewing all day, dark clouds gathering ominously on the horizon. As a retired police officer, I had weathered my fair share of storms, but this one felt different, charged with an eerie electricity that set my nerves on edge. I settled into my armchair by the fireplace, the crackling flames a comforting contrast to the howling wind outside. The rain pounded against the windows, casting distorted shadows across the room. It was well past midnight when I heard a faint scraping noise, barely audible over the storm's fury. I frowned, my instincts instantly on high alert. Living alone, I was accustomed to the quiet, attuned to even the slightest disturbance. I strained my ears, listening intently. There it was again, unmistakable this time, a metallic clink, like a window being forced open. My hand instinctively went to the drawer where I kept my service revolver. The intruder was inside. I moved silently, every step deliberate and calculated. Years on the force had taught me to trust my instincts and act decisively under pressure. I peeked around the corner, heart pounding in my chest. The hallway was dim, shadows dancing in the flickering light of the hallway lamp. I gripped the revolver tighter, ready for whatever came next. Lightning flashed, illuminating the silhouette of a figure at the end of the hallway. Adrenaline surged through me as I recognized the intruder, a masked man, clad in dark clothing, moving swiftly toward the stairs. I cursed under my breath, silently cursing my luck. My house was secluded, nestled at the edge of town, the nearest neighbor miles away. Help would not arrive in time. It was up to me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come. With practiced precision, I moved silently through the shadows, closing the distance between us. The intruder reached the stairs, his back to me. This was my chance. I stepped forward, aiming the revolver squarely at his center mass. "Freeze! Police!" I barked, my voice steady and authoritative. The intruder froze, his masked face turning toward me in surprise. For a moment, we locked eyes, his white with shock, mine narrowed with determination. "Drop the weapon and put your hands up," I commanded, my voice echoing through the silent house. The intruder hesitated, weighing his options. Lightning flashed again, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. In that moment of distraction, the intruder lunged toward the stairs, desperation driving him forward. Instinct took over. I squeezed the trigger, the gunshot reverberating through the house. The intruder stumbled, a cry of pain escaping his lips as he collapsed onto the stairs. I approached cautiously, keeping the revolver trained on him. Blood seeped from a wound in his shoulder, staining his dark shirt crimson. His mask had fallen away, revealing a face twisted with agony and fear. "Why?" he gasped, struggling to sit up. His voice was hoarse, filled with confusion and pain. "Why did you break in?" I demanded, my own adrenaline still coursing through my veins. "Who sent you?" The intruder shook his head weakly, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "No one sent me," he rasped. "I needed money, couldn't pay." My brow furrowed. "You chose the wrong house," I said grimly. "Now stay still while I call for help." I kept the intruder in my sights as I reached for my phone, dialing emergency services with practiced efficiency. "This is Officer Martin," I said when the dispatcher answered. "I need an ambulance at my location. Suspect down with a gunshot wound." The dispatcher acknowledged the call, sending help my way. I returned my attention to the intruder, who was now slumped against the stairs, eyes closed against the pane. "Why did you become a cop?" he suddenly asked, his voice barely a whisper. His question caught me off guard. "To protect and serve," I replied automatically, unsure where he was going with this. The intruder chuckled weakly, wincing as pain shot through his injured shoulder. "Yes, you're still doing that." Before I could respond, headlights flashed through the windows, a welcome sight in the stormy night. The ambulance had arrived. Paramedics rushed inside, their presence a whirlwind of efficiency. They quickly assessed the intruder's condition, stabilizing him before transporting him to the hospital. Alone in the quiet aftermath, I sank into a chair, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb. I replayed the events in my mind, questioning my actions, analyzing every decision. The storm continued to rage outside, rain lashing against the windows. I felt a pang of sympathy for the intruder, wondering what had driven him to desperation. Hours passed before the police arrived, taking my statement and securing the scene. They commended my quick thinking and assured me that the intruder would face charges once he recovered. As dawn broke, casting a pale light through the windows, I finally allowed myself to relax. The ordeal was over, but its impact lingered, a reminder of the dangers that could lurk even in the quietest moments. I cleaned up the shattered glass and bloodstains, my mind racing with conflicting emotions. Relief mingled with a lingering sense of unease. Would this incident haunt me? Days turned into weeks, and life gradually returned to normal. The house felt emptier now, the echoes of that fateful night lingering in every corner. I kept the revolver close at hand, a constant reminder of my years on the force and the instincts that had saved me. I hoped never to use it again. But the memories remained, etched into my consciousness, a testament to the fragility of security, the unpredictability of human nature. And as the storm clouds finally dispersed, giving way to clear skies, I found solace in the quiet moments, grateful for each breath and each heartbeat that signaled life, resilience, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The sky was clear, a tapestry of stars stretching infinitely above me. I had chosen this secluded spot for its isolation, far from the noise and chaos of everyday life. Setting up camp, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The dense forest surrounding my tent was a comforting barrier, shielding me from the world. The evening was serene, filled with the sounds of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. I built a small fire, its warmth a welcome companion in the cool night air. After a simple meal, I settled down with a book, the firelight flickering softly around me. The tranquility was intoxicating, a rare moment of pure relaxation. As the fire died down, I crawled into my tent, the weight of the day pulling me into a deep sleep. The forest was a cradle, lulling me with its gentle whispers. I woke with a start, my heart pounding in the darkness. Something was wrong. I lay still, listening intently. The silence was heavy, oppressive. A rustling sound came from outside the tent. I froze, fear creeping up my spine. Someone or something was out there. Slowly, I reached for my flashlight, my hand trembling. I clicked it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. The rustling continued, closer now. I unzipped the tent cautiously, peering out. My campsite was dimly lit by the moon, casting long shadows. Then I saw him, a figure hunched over my backpack, rummaging through my things. Panic surged through me. "Hey!" I shouted, hoping to scare him off. The figure straightened, turning to face me. His eyes glinted in the moonlight, a predatory gaze locking onto mine. He didn't run, didn't even flinch. Instead, he took a step closer, his expression unreadable. I scrambled out of the tent, flashlight in one hand, a camping knife in the other. "What do you want?" I demanded, my voice shaking. He said nothing, just watched me with an unsettling calmness. I felt exposed, vulnerable. The isolation that had felt so comforting earlier now seemed like a trap. There was no one to hear me scream, no one to help. The man took another step forward, and I brandished the knife. "Stay back," I warned, trying to sound braver than I felt. A smile spread across his face, chilling in its absence of warmth. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice low and menacing. My heart raced, adrenaline flooding my system. "I'm not alone," I lied. "My friends will be back any minute." His smile widened, a grotesque parody of amusement. "No, they won't." He took another step, and I knew I had to act. Without thinking, I lunged at him, the knife aimed at his chest. He dodged easily, his movements fluid and practiced. He grabbed my wrist, twisting it painfully. The knife fell from my grasp, clattering to the ground. He shoved me backward, and I stumbled, falling hard on the forest floor. Pain shot through me, but I scrambled to my feet, ready to fight. He stood over me, a dark silhouette against the night sky. "Why are you doing this?" I gasped, trying to keep my distance. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't decipher, malice, perhaps, or madness. "Because I can," he replied simply, as if that explained everything. He lunged at me, and I barely had time to react. I ducked, rolling to the side. My mind raced, searching for a way out. I needed to get to my car, but it was a mile away, through dense forest. He advanced again, and I threw a handful of dirt in his face, hoping to blind him. He snarled, wiping at his eyes, giving me a precious few seconds. I bolted, running blindly into the woods. Branches slapped at my face and arms, but I didn't care. I had to get away. I could hear him behind me, crashing through the underbrush, his breath coming in harsh, angry gasps. I pushed myself harder, my legs burning with effort. The forest was a maze, each tree and rock looking the same. Panic clawed at my throat, but I forced myself to keep going. I stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight illuminating a small, abandoned cabin. Desperate, I ran for it, praying the door wasn't locked. I slammed into the door, relief flooding through me as it gave way. I rushed inside, slamming it shut behind me. The cabin was dark and musty, filled with decaying furniture. I searched frantically for something to barricade the door. I found an old chair, wedging it under the doorknob. It wouldn't hold for long, but it was all I had. I backed away, searching for another exit. The man pounded on the door, his fury evident. "You can't hide forever," he shouted, the door shuddering under his blows. I spotted a small window on the far wall. It was narrow, but I could squeeze through. I hurried over, prying it open with trembling hands. Just as I was about to climb out, the door gave way, crashing open. I didn't look back, diving through the window and landing hard outside. I ran again, the man's curses fading behind me. My only thought was to get to my car, to escape this nightmare. The forest closed in around me, but I kept going, fueled by sheer terror and the hope of survival.